The day started like any other. I woke up to the sound of my alarm, the same song I'd been waking up to for the past 10 years. I rolled over and saw Sarah still asleep, her face serene and peaceful. For a moment, I considered staying in bed with her, just one more hour of normalcy. But reality called. Today was the day I had another checkup. I had been secretly battling cancer for months, and today, the doctors would tell me if the treatment was working or if my time was running out. I kissed Sarah on the forehead, whispering that I had to leave early for work. She mumbled something in her sleep and turned over. I dressed quickly, grabbed my briefcase, and headed out the door. The drive to the hospital was a blur, my mind racing with thoughts of what the doctor might say. I had been through so many ups and downs with this illness, but I wasn't ready to give up. Not yet. At the hospital, I sat in the waiting room, surrounded by strangers, all of us caught in our own private hells. When my name was called, I felt a cold dread settle in my stomach. Dr. Evans greeted me with a forced smile and led me to his office. We exchanged the usual pleasantries, but I could tell from his demeanor that the news wasn't good. "Michael, I'm afraid the latest scans show that the cancer has spread. There's nothing more we can do to stop it. You have about 43 days left." His words hit me like a freight train. 43 days. That's all I had left. I nodded numbly, barely registering the rest of his words. He talked about palliative care, making the most of my remaining time, but I was already lost in my own thoughts. How could I tell Sarah? How could I spend my last days pretending everything was fine? I left the hospital in a daze, the world around me seeming unreal. I drove aimlessly for a while, trying to come to terms with the news. Finally, I decided to go home. I needed to see Sarah, to hold her, even if I couldn't tell her the truth. I pulled into the driveway, noticing that David's car was parked nearby. I thought nothing of it. He was our neighbor and often parked there. As I walked up the steps to our house, I felt an inexplicable sense of dread. The house was eerily quiet. I pushed open the door and stepped inside, my footsteps echoing in the silence. I called out for Sarah, but there was no answer. I made my way upstairs, my heart pounding in my chest. When I reached our bedroom, I heard muffled sounds. At first, I couldn't comprehend what I was hearing. Then, as I pushed the door open, the scene before me became painfully clear. Sarah was in bed with David, their bodies tangled together in a way that left no doubt about what they were doing. Time seemed to stand still. My vision blurred, and I felt like I was outside my own body, watching this nightmare unfold. Sarah and David were too engrossed to notice me at first. When they finally did, their faces turned from ecstasy to horror in an instant. Sarah scrambled to cover herself, her eyes wide with shock and guilt. "Michael, I can explain," she stammered, but the words sounded hollow and meaningless. I stood there, frozen, unable to speak or move. The betrayal cut deeper than any pain I had felt before. My wife, the woman I loved, the woman I was planning to spend my last days with, had been unfaithful. And with our neighbor, no less. I turned and walked out of the room, out of the house, my mind a whirlwind of emotions. Betrayal, anger, sadness, and above all, a crushing sense of despair. I got into my car and drove, not caring where I was going, just needing to get away. Away from the lies, the betrayal, the unbearable reality of my own impending death. I drove for hours, not knowing where I was going, just needing to escape the suffocating reality of what I had seen. Eventually, I found myself at a small park on the outskirts of town. I parked the car and walked over to a bench, collapsing onto it as if the weight of the world had finally crushed me. My mind replayed the scene over and over. Sarah and David in our bed, their faces twisted in pleasure, then shock. The betrayal was too much to bear, especially now, when I needed her the most. I had been so careful to protect her from the truth about my illness, to keep things as normal as possible, and this was how she repaid me. I stared at the ground, feeling numb and empty. The cancer had taken so much from me already, and now it was taking my sanity. How was I supposed to spend my last days knowing that my wife had been unfaithful? How could I ever trust her again? As the sun began to set, I realized I had to go back home. I couldn't run forever. I needed answers, and Sarah needed to explain herself. I stood up, my legs feeling like lead, and walked back to my car. The drive home was a blur, my mind racing with thoughts of what I would say, how I would confront her. When I pulled into the driveway, David's car was gone. I took a deep breath and walked into the house. Sarah was sitting on the couch, her face pale and drawn. She looked up as I entered, her eyes filled with tears. "Michael, please, let me explain," she began, her voice trembling. I stood there, crossing my arms, waiting for her to continue. She took a deep breath and started to speak, her words tumbling out in a rush. "I'm so sorry, Michael. I never meant for this to happen. It was a mistake, a horrible mistake. I was feeling so lonely, so scared. You've been so distant lately, and I didn't know why. I thought you didn't love me anymore." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. I had been distant, but only because I was trying to protect her. I had been dealing with my own fears and pain, and now I realized that my silence had pushed her away. "I know I've been distant," I said quietly, "but it wasn't because I didn't love you. I have cancer, Sarah. I've been fighting it for months, and today I found out I have 43 days left to live." Her eyes widened in shock, and she covered her mouth with her hands. "Oh my God, Michael, why didn't you tell me? Because I didn't want to burden you. I wanted to protect you. And now I find out you've been sleeping with our neighbor." She burst into tears, her body shaking with sobs. "I'm so sorry, Michael. I never meant to hurt you. I was just so scared and lonely. Please forgive me." I looked at her, my heart breaking all over again. I wanted to forgive her, to hold her and tell her everything would be okay. But the pain was too fresh, too raw. I turned and walked out of the room, heading upstairs to the guest bedroom. I needed time to think, to process everything that had happened. As I lay in the guest bed, staring at the ceiling, I felt a crushing sense of despair. My world was falling apart, and I didn't know how to put it back together. I had 43 days left to live, and now, instead of spending them with the woman I loved, I was facing a future filled with pain and betrayal. I closed my eyes, willing sleep to come, but it was elusive. My mind was a whirlwind of thoughts and emotions, and I knew that the days ahead would be some of the hardest of my life. But I also knew that I had to face them head on, no matter how much it hurt. The next morning, the house was filled with an uncomfortable silence. I had spent a restless night in the guest bedroom, my mind cycling through anger, sadness, and an overwhelming sense of betrayal. The rays of dawn crept through the window, signaling the start of another day. I knew I had to face Sarah, to have the conversation that I dreaded but couldn't avoid. I made my way downstairs, each step feeling heavier than the last. Sarah was in the kitchen, a cup of coffee cradled in her hands, her eyes red from a night of crying. She looked up as I entered, her expression a mix of hope and fear. I sat down across from her, the silence between us stretching unbearably. "Michael, she began, but I held up a hand to stop her. "I need to understand," I said quietly. "Why him? Why now?" She looked down at her coffee, her fingers trembling. "I don't know, Michael. I've been feeling so lost and alone. You were always so distant, and I didn't know why. David was there, and it just happened. I know that's not an excuse, but it's the truth." I sighed, running a hand through my hair. "I was distant because I was trying to protect you. I didn't want you to worry about me, about what was happening. I wanted to keep things normal for as long as I could." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "I'm so sorry. I should have seen that something was wrong. I should have been there for you instead of doing what I did." The weight of her words settled between us. I could see the remorse in her eyes, but the pain was still too raw. "I don't know how we move forward from this," I admitted. "I have so little time left, and I wanted to spend it with you, making memories, not dealing with this." Sarah reached across the table, taking my hand in hers. "Let me make it up to you, Michael. Let me be there for you, to help you through this. I love you, and I want to make things right." I looked at her, seeing the woman I had loved for so many years, the woman who had betrayed me. Part of me wanted to push her away, to protect myself from more pain. But another part of me, the part that still loved her, wanted to give her a chance. "We'll take it one day at a time," I said finally. "But I can't promise anything. This hurt runs deep, Sarah." She nodded, her grip on my hand tightening. "I understand. Thank you, Michael. I'll do everything I can to make things right." The days that followed were a strange mix of normalcy and tension. Sarah tried to be there for me, to support me, but there was a wall between us that neither of us could ignore. I continued to go to my appointments, each one a reminder of my limited time. Sarah insisted on coming with me, sitting in the waiting room while I saw the doctors. It was a small comfort, but it didn't erase the betrayal. One evening, as we sat together on the couch, Sarah turned to me, her expression serious. "Michael, I want to talk about the future. I know things are hard right now, but we need to make the most of the time we have left." I nodded, appreciating her determination. "What do you have in mind?" She took a deep breath. "Let's go somewhere, just the two of us. Somewhere we can make new memories, away from all this." The idea was tempting. To escape, even for a little while, and try to find some semblance of peace. "Where would we go?" I asked. "Remember that cabin we rented years ago up by the lake? It was so peaceful there. We could go back just for a few days." I thought about it, the memory of that trip coming back to me. It had been a perfect getaway, filled with laughter and love. "Okay," I said finally. "Let's do it. Let's go to the cabin." Sarah smiled, a glimmer of hope in her eyes. "I'll make the arrangements. We can leave in a couple of days." As we prepared for the trip, I found myself feeling a mix of emotions. Part of me was looking forward to it, hoping that it could be a chance for us to reconnect. But another part of me was wary, the hurt and betrayal still fresh in my mind. I knew that this trip wouldn't solve everything, but it was a step forward, a chance to find some peace in the midst of the chaos. The drive to the cabin was filled with an awkward silence, each of us lost in our thoughts. The scenery passed by in a blur, the familiar landscape doing little to calm my nerves. When we finally arrived, the sight of the cabin brought a rush of memories. It looked almost exactly the same as it had all those years ago, nestled among the trees overlooking the serene lake. We unpacked the car in silence, both of us unsure of how to bridge the gap that had formed between us. Once everything was inside, Sarah suggested we take a walk down to the lake. I agreed, hoping that the tranquility of the place would help ease the tension. We walked in silence, the only sounds the crunch of leaves under our feet and the distant call of birds. When we reached the shore, we stood side by side, looking out over the water. The sun was beginning to set, casting a golden glow over the lake. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" Sarah said softly. I nodded. "It is. I've missed this place." She turned to me, her eyes filled with emotion. "Michael, I know things are hard right now, but I want you to know that I'm committed to making things right. I love you, and I'm so sorry for what I did. Please let me help you through this." I looked at her, seeing the sincerity in her eyes. Despite everything, I still loved her. I wanted to believe that we could find a way to move forward. "I want to try," I said quietly. "I don't know if I can forgive you completely, but I want to try." She smiled, tears brimming in her eyes. "That's all I ask. Thank you, Michael." Over the next few days, we settled into a routine. We spent our mornings by the lake, fishing or simply sitting and talking. In the afternoons, we explored the surrounding woods, enjoying the beauty of nature. Evenings were spent by the fireplace, reminiscing about the past and sharing our hopes for the future. Slowly, the walls between us began to crumble. We laughed together, shared our fears and dreams, and started to rebuild the trust that had been shattered. I found myself opening up to Sarah in ways I hadn't in years, sharing my thoughts and feelings about my illness and our relationship. One night, as we sat by the fire, I took Sarah's hand. "I'm glad we came here," I said. "It's been good for us." She smiled, squeezing my hand. "Me too, Michael. I feel like we're finding our way back to each other." I nodded, feeling a sense of peace that had eluded me for so long. "I know we have a long way to go, but I'm hopeful." "I love you, Sarah." Tears filled her eyes as she leaned in to kiss me. I love you too, Michael. We'll get through this together. As the days passed, I found myself growing stronger, not physically, but emotionally. The trip to the cabin had given us a chance to reconnect, to start healing the wounds that had torn us apart. I knew that the road ahead would be difficult, but I felt a renewed sense of hope. On our last night at the cabin, we sat on the porch, looking out at the stars. Sarah rested her head on my shoulder, and I wrapped my arm around her, pulling her close. The silence between us was comfortable, filled with the unspoken promise of a new beginning. Michael, I know we still have a lot to work through, but I believe we can do it, Sarah said softly. I nodded, feeling a sense of calm. I believe that too. We'll take it one day at a time. As we sat there, surrounded by the beauty of the night, I felt a sense of peace. Despite the pain and betrayal, I knew that we were on the right path. We had a long way to go, but we were moving forward, together. Days turned into weeks. My health began to deteriorate faster than I had anticipated. The fatigue was relentless, and the pain, once manageable, became a constant companion. One morning, I woke up feeling particularly unwell. The pain in my abdomen was sharper than usual, and I could barely muster the strength to get out of bed. Sarah noticed immediately and insisted on taking me to the hospital. I tried to resist, not wanting to burden her further, but she was adamant. We're going to the hospital, Michael, she said firmly, her eyes filled with worry. You're not doing this alone anymore. I didn't have the energy to argue. She helped me dress, her hands trembling as she buttoned my shirt. We drove to the hospital in silence, the weight of what might come hanging heavily between us. At the hospital, they admitted me immediately. The doctors ran a battery of tests, their faces grim as they reviewed the results. Sarah stayed by my side, holding my hand, her fear palpable. After what felt like an eternity, Dr. Evans came to see us. Michael, we need to talk, he said, his expression serious. The cancer has spread to your liver. We need to start you on a more aggressive treatment plan immediately. Sarah gasped, her grip on my hand tightening. What does that mean? How much time does he have? Dr. Evans hesitated, his eyes flickering with sympathy. It's hard to say. The treatment could buy him some time, but without it, we're looking at weeks, maybe even days. I felt a cold dread settle in my stomach. The thought of more treatment, more pain, was almost unbearable. But the thought of leaving Sarah, of not having more time with her, was even worse. I looked at her, seeing the fear and determination in her eyes. We'll do the treatment, I said quietly. I want to fight this. Dr. Evans nodded. We'll get started right away. Michael, I'm going to be honest with you. This is going to be tough, but we'll do everything we can to make you comfortable. Sarah stayed with me through the first round of treatment. The chemotherapy was brutal, leaving me weak and nauseous, but she was always there, holding my hand, whispering words of encouragement. Her strength became my anchor, something to hold on to when the pain was too much to bear. As the days passed, I slipped in and out of consciousness, the world around me a haze of pain and medication. There were moments of clarity, brief windows where I could see Sarah's face, hear her voice, feel her love. Those moments were my lifeline, pulling me back from the brink. One night, I woke to find Sarah sitting by my bed, her head resting on her arms, fast asleep. I reached out, my hand trembling, and gently touched her hair. She stirred, her eyes fluttering open. Michael, she whispered, her voice thick with sleep. How are you feeling? I managed a weak smile. Better, now that you're here. She smiled back, though her eyes were filled with worry. I'm not going anywhere. I'm with you every step of the way. The days turned into weeks, and slowly I began to stabilize. The treatment was taking its toll, but I was still here, still fighting. Sarah's unwavering support was my constant source of strength. We talked about everything, our past, our dreams, our fears. The intimacy we had rediscovered at the cabin deepened, creating a bond that felt unbreakable. One afternoon, as Sarah and I sat in the hospital room, a nurse came in with a surprise visitor. It was David. The sight of him made my blood run cold, but Sarah squeezed my hand, her expression unreadable. I asked him to come, she said quietly. There are things we need to clear up, for all of us. David stepped forward, looking uncomfortable. Michael, I don't know what to say. I'm so sorry for everything. I never meant to hurt you. I stared at him, my emotions a turbulent mix of anger and pity. Why, David? Why did you do it? He sighed, running a hand through his hair. I was lonely and, well, that's no excuse. I was selfish, and I let my feelings for Sarah get the better of me. I'm so sorry. Sarah looked at me, her eyes pleading. Michael, I need you to hear this. David and it was a mistake. It's over, and it's been over for a while. He wanted to come and apologize, to try to make amends. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the past few months pressing down on me. David, I appreciate your apology, but the trust you and Sarah broke, it's not something that can be easily repaired. David nodded, his expression somber. I understand. I just wanted you to know that I'm truly sorry. I hope you can find it in your heart to forgive us. Forgiveness. It was a word that had haunted me since the day I found them together. Could I truly forgive them? Did I have the strength to let go of the anger and betrayal? I'll try, I said finally, but it's going to take time. David nodded, his eyes filled with regret. Thank you, Michael. I hope you find peace. After he left, Sarah turned to me, her eyes brimming with tears. Thank you, Michael. I know that wasn't easy. I nodded, feeling a sense of exhaustion wash over me. We still have a long way to go, Sarah, but I'm willing to try. As the weeks passed, my health continued to improve. The aggressive treatment was working, buying us more time. Sarah and I took it one day at a time, rebuilding our relationship piece by piece. It wasn't easy, and there were days when the pain of the past threatened to overwhelm us. But we faced it together, drawing strength from each other. A week later, I noticed negative changes. My strength seemed to wane with each passing day. Sarah remained my constant companion, her presence a comfort amidst the sterile environment and relentless pain. We had hoped for a miracle, but deep down, I think we both knew the truth. It was during a routine checkup that Dr. Evans delivered the devastating news. He came into the room, his face grave, and sat down opposite us. Sarah gripped my hand, her knuckles white with tension. Michael, I'm afraid the cancer has spread further. It's now in your lungs and spine. We didn't expect this so soon, but we're looking at a much shorter time frame. You have approximately 21 days left. Sarah's gasp echoed through the room, and tears streamed down her face. I felt a numbness wash over me, as if I had been prepared for this moment all along. The fight was coming to an end, and there was nothing left to do but accept it. Dr. Evans offered his condolences and left us alone. Sarah buried her face in my shoulder, her sobs racking her body. I held her close, feeling a profound sadness settle over me. We had hoped for more time, but life had other plans. That evening, as the sun set outside the hospital window, I made a decision. I had to talk to Sarah, to explain why I had chosen to forgive her. I didn't want to leave this world with any regrets, and I needed her to understand. Sarah, I said softly, brushing a strand of hair from her face. There's something I need to tell you. She looked up, her eyes red and swollen. What is it, Michael? I took a deep breath, gathering my thoughts. I've been thinking a lot about everything that's happened. About us, about David, about the cancer. And I realized that I didn't want to spend my remaining days filled with anger and resentment. I wanted to forgive you because I still love you, and because I didn't want to die alone. Her tears started anew, and she clung to me, her sobs shaking her body. Oh, Michael, I'm so sorry. I never meant to hurt you. I love you so much. I know, I whispered, my own voice breaking. And that's why I chose to forgive you. Because despite everything, I couldn't imagine facing this without you. I wanted to hold on to the love we had, to try and find some peace in these final days. Sarah nodded, her tears falling onto my shirt. I'll be here, Michael, every step of the way. We'll face this together. In the days that followed, we tried to make the most of our time. We revisited old memories, shared stories, and talked about our hopes and dreams, even if they were no longer attainable. We laughed, we cried, and we held each other close, cherishing every moment. One afternoon, Sarah brought a photo album to the hospital. We sat together, flipping through the pages, reliving the happy times. There were pictures of our wedding, our vacations, the little moments that had made our life together so special. Each photo was a reminder of the love we had shared, a love that had endured even the darkest of times. "Do you remember this?" Sarah asked, pointing to a photo of us at the beach, our faces sun-kissed and smiling. I nodded, a smile tugging at my lips. "Of course. That was the summer we went to Cape Cod. We spent the whole day swimming and building sandcastles." Sarah laughed, a sound that was music to my ears. "And you got so sunburned you could hardly move the next day." We continued through the album, each picture a thread in the tapestry of our life. It was a bittersweet journey, but one that brought us closer together. As the days dwindled, I found solace in these memories, in the love that had defined our years together. The hospital staff was incredibly supportive, doing everything they could to make me comfortable. They arranged for a private room where Sarah could stay with me, and they ensured we had as much privacy as possible. It was a small mercy, but one that meant the world to us. One evening, as we sat by the window, watching the stars come out, I turned to Sarah. "I want to write letters," I said. "To you, to our friends, to everyone who's been a part of my life. I want them to know how much they meant to me." Sarah nodded, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "I think that's a wonderful idea, Michael. I'll help you with anything you need." We spent the next few days writing those letters. Sarah brought in a laptop, and I dictated while she typed. It was a cathartic experience, a way to express all the things I wanted to say but couldn't find the words for. Each letter was a farewell, a final connection with the people I loved. As the days passed, my condition worsened. The pain became more intense, and I was confined to the bed, unable to move without assistance. Sarah was always there, her presence a constant source of comfort. She talked to me, read to me, and held my hand, her strength unwavering. One night, as I lay in the dark, I felt a sudden clarity. I knew my time was almost up, but I also knew that I wasn't alone. Sarah was with me, and our love had endured despite everything. I reached out, finding her hand in the darkness. "Sarah," I whispered, my voice weak. "Thank you for everything." She squeezed my hand, her voice choked with emotion. "I love you, Michael. Always." In that moment, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. I had forgiven, I had loved, and I had found a way to let go of the pain. As I drifted off to sleep, I knew that I wasn't alone. I had Sarah, and that was enough. As the days continued to pass, something unexpected happened that neither Sarah nor I could have anticipated. One afternoon, as I lay resting in my hospital bed, the door swung open, and in walked a woman I hadn't seen in over 20 years. Laura, my high school sweetheart. Laura and I had parted ways amicably after college, and she had moved abroad. We had lost touch over the years, but seeing her now, standing at the foot of my bed, was a shock. "Michael?" she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "Laura?" I replied, my voice barely a whisper. Sarah, sitting beside me, looked from me to Laura, confusion etched on her face. "Who is this?" she asked. "This is Laura, an old friend," I explained, my mind racing to make sense of her sudden appearance. Laura stepped forward, tears in her eyes. "I heard about your condition from an old friend. I had to come and see you." Sarah stood up, her protective instincts kicking in. "Why are you here now after all these years?" Laura took a deep breath, her eyes never leaving mine. "Because I needed to tell Michael something important. Something I should have told him a long time ago." The tension in the room was palpable. Sarah's eyes narrowed, suspicion and curiosity battling for dominance. "What is it, Laura?" Laura looked at me, her expression filled with regret. "Michael, when we parted ways all those years ago, I was pregnant. I didn't know how to tell you, and then life took us in different directions. I raised our son, Ethan, on my own. He's 20 now, and he's been wanting to meet his father." The revelation hit me like a bolt of lightning. "I had a son?" My mind reeled as I tried to process the information. "A son?" I managed to say, my voice choked with emotion. "Yes," Laura said, tears streaming down her face. "I'm so sorry I didn't tell you sooner. I thought it was too late, but when I heard about your illness, I knew I had to come." Sarah was silent, her face a mask of shock and confusion. "Why didn't you tell him before?" Laura shook her head, her voice breaking. "I was scared. I didn't know how you'd react. And then time just slipped away. But Ethan deserves to know his father, even if it's just for a short time. The room fell into a heavy silence as we all absorbed the gravity of Laura's words. I had a son I had never met, and now, with my time running out, I had the chance to know him. I want to meet him, I said finally, my voice filled with determination. Laura nodded, a small smile breaking through her tears. He's here in town. I can bring him tomorrow. Sarah reached out, taking my hand. We'll do this together, Michael. That night was filled with restless anticipation. I couldn't sleep, my mind racing with thoughts of meeting my son. Sarah stayed by my side, her presence a steadying force amidst the chaos of my emotions. The next day, Laura arrived with Ethan. As he stepped into the room, I saw a reflection of my younger self. He was tall, with the same eyes and determined expression. My heart ached with a mix of pride and regret. Ethan, Laura said gently, this is your father, Michael. Ethan approached the bed, his eyes wide with curiosity and a hint of apprehension. Hi, Dad, he said, his voice wavering. I reached out, my hand trembling. Ethan, it's so good to finally meet you. He took my hand, his grip firm and warm. I've always wanted to meet you. Mom told me so much about you. Tears filled my eyes as I looked at my son, the son I never knew I had. I'm sorry I wasn't there for you, Ethan, but I'm here now, and I want to know everything about you. Over the next few days, Ethan and I spent every moment we could together. We talked about his life, his dreams, and his experiences. I learned about his love for music, his talent for painting, and his aspirations for the future. Sarah and Laura were there too, supporting us and helping to bridge the years of separation. One evening, as the sun set outside the hospital window, Ethan played his guitar for me, a song he had written himself. The music was beautiful, filled with emotion and a sense of connection. As I listened, I felt a profound sense of gratitude for this unexpected gift. Despite the pain and the looming end, I had been given a chance to connect with my son, to leave a piece of myself with him. The days with Ethan brought a renewed sense of purpose and joy. But life had one more twist in store for us. One morning, as I lay in my hospital bed, I felt a sudden sharp pain that took my breath away. Sarah, who had been reading beside me, noticed immediately. Michael, are you okay? She asked, her voice trembling with worry. I shook my head, struggling to catch my breath. Something's wrong, Sarah. Get the nurse. She rushed out of the room, and within moments, a team of doctors and nurses surrounded me. They worked quickly, administering medication and checking my vitals. Dr. Evans, the lead doctor, looked at me with a grave expression. Michael, the cancer has spread more aggressively than we anticipated. We need to manage your pain and make you as comfortable as possible. I'm so sorry. The words hit me like a freight train. I knew my time was limited, but hearing it confirmed was still a shock. Sarah clung to my hand, her eyes filled with tears. For the next few days, I was confined to the bed, the pain relentless. Sarah and Ethan stayed by my side, their presence a comfort. James, my estranged brother, arrived unexpectedly, having heard about my condition from a mutual friend. Michael, he said softly as he entered the room. I came as soon as I heard. I'm so sorry for everything. Seeing James after so many years brought a mix of emotions, anger, regret, and a deep longing for reconciliation. James, I replied, my voice weak. It's been a long time. He nodded, his eyes filled with sorrow. Too long. I've missed you, brother. Sarah and Ethan gave us space as James and I talked. We spoke of our past, the mistakes we'd made, and the pain we'd caused each other. It was a difficult conversation, but it was also healing. By the end of it, we had found a way to forgive each other and mend our broken bond. In those final days, surrounded by the people I loved, I found a sense of peace. We shared stories, laughed about old times, and created new memories. Despite the pain, there was a profound sense of love and connection. One evening, as the sun set outside the hospital window, I asked Sarah to bring me a notepad and pen. I want to write a letter, I said. To you, to Ethan, to everyone. She nodded, her eyes filled with understanding. Of course, Michael. With shaky hands, I began to write. The words flowed from my heart, a mixture of gratitude, love, and farewell. I wrote to Sarah, thanking her for her unwavering support and love. To Ethan, expressing my pride and joy in being his father. To James, for finding a way back to me, and to everyone who had touched my life, sharing my final thoughts and wishes. When I finished, I handed the letters to Sarah. "Make sure they get these, okay?" She nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I promise, Michael." That night, as I lay in bed, I felt a sense of calm wash over me. I knew the end was near, but I was at peace. I had said my goodbyes, mended broken relationships, and found love and forgiveness. As the first light of dawn broke through the window, I turned to Sarah, who had fallen asleep beside me. I gently woke her, needing to say one last thing. "Sarah," I whispered, my voice barely audible. "Thank you for everything. I love you." She looked at me, her eyes brimming with tears. "I love you too, Michael, always." With my remaining strength, I looked at Ethan and James, who had woken up and were now standing by the bed. "Take care of each other. Family is everything." They nodded, their faces filled with emotion. "We will," they promised. As I closed my eyes, I felt a deep sense of gratitude for the life I had lived and the people I had loved. My journey was ending, but I was surrounded by those who mattered most. As I sit here writing this, I have only 2 days left to live. I wanted to share my story with you, not just as a way to process everything that has happened, but also to offer some advice to those who may find themselves in a similar situation. Life is unpredictable and often unfair. You may face betrayal, illness, or other hardships that seem insurmountable. But no matter what happens, it's important to hold on to the things that matter most: love, forgiveness, and hope. Forgive those who have hurt you, not because they deserve it, but because you deserve peace. Cherish the moments you have with the people you love, and make the most of every day, even when the future seems uncertain. If you're struggling with a difficult relationship or facing a terminal illness, know that you are not alone. Seek support from friends, family, and professionals who can help you navigate these challenges. And above all, never lose hope. Thank you for taking the time to listen to my story. I hope it offers some comfort and insight to those who need it. With love and gratitude, Michael.